Hello everyone, welcome to Visconia, and today we have Rafael Dunn here with us talking about a new article done by him called Why the Disparaging Western Media Coverage is Only Prolonging the Ukrainian Crisis. So Rafael, help us understand by disparaging and vilification, what do you exactly mean?
Okay, so the rationale behind using the terms disparaging and vilification is simple. I wanted to strongly assert that Western media coverage has undeniably portrayed Russia in a rather negative and contentious manner. So, for instance, when the Malaysian flight MH17 went down over Donetsk, the media were very quick to point the blame in Russia's direction. I still remember this one article by The Sun, which was called Putin's Missile. I found this to be one of the many article headings I've come across, which I found to be quite inflammatory and reproachful of Russia, even without little evidence sustaining this, and I strongly believe this to be geopolitically motivated.
So where do you see Ukraine's position in this wrestling game between her neighbors? Really, I guess we have to include the universal neighbor, the US, here.
Okay, well, unfortunately, the way I see the Ukrainian government in this conflict is merely as a puppet being directed by the strings of the EU and NATO, going along with whatever counsel the West deems necessary. Many would argue that this is destroying Ukrainian self-determination, yet we need to think to ourselves, is Ukraine really in a position to assert its sovereignty on its own? That being said, one could also make the argument that the very involvement of the West in Ukrainian affairs is just increasing Russia's willingness to partake in military rhetoric, and thus ensuring that the Cold War-esque standoff continues.
What's the media's role in this mess then? Like you said, not helping, but how not helping?
Well, as mentioned earlier, Guan, the media presenting a rather skewed and biased picture of the crisis. It is a seemingly validating Western intervention. So how is this not helping, you ask? Well, firstly, it's swaying public opinion in favour of Western intervention as a somewhat defensive measure against a supposed threat to democracy. This defence proliferation is calling for more military intervention in Ukraine, and this is subsequently increasing Russia's military involvement. I would also like to add that bellicose Western media coverage is also fueling resentment within Russia, and thus further distancing Russia from the negotiation table, which, in my humble opinion, is the only avenue in which this conflict can end
This
peacefully.
came in freshly that some countries from the West camp are sending military support to Ukraine now. Do you see a role media is playing in this too?
Well, I already explained, but the media are legitimising intervention in Ukraine. This is very unfortunate as the media has a great responsibility to provide a balanced reporting of events. It also needs to describe reality in a very transparent and unbiased way. In doing so, I think it could be a great force for good, so like a lighthouse in the stormy seas of conflict, for example. Sadly, in my opinion, the media is nowhere near to fulfilling this role in the Ukrainian conflict.
Do you think the Western media coverage that we're witnessing now a result of capricious coverage or a deliberate, unrestrained license?
Well, I think the freedom to voice one's opinion in a democratic state is always going to be abused but to further one's own vested interests. So the capricious coverage I've come to witness in British newspapers and I presume elsewhere around the West is the byproduct of state manipulation. So yeah, I think capricious coverage and deliberate unrestrained license are very much analogous in this respect.
So we've seen some tragedies as a result of the clashing between two blocs, and this has been proven to be not so desirable. Would a multipolar power distribution introduce more checks, balances, and weight on the international system? And obviously, I'm referring to the rise of China, which is claimed to be a peaceful one.
Well, I think it was the great thinker Blaise Pascal who once said, "Justice and power must be brought together so that whatever is just must be powerful, and whatever is powerful must be just." So with this quote in mind, it's my opinion that the more concentrated political power is in few hands, the less able it is to serve the principles of justice. Hence, the accumulation of power into single blocks is not healthy for enduring peace. So yeah, Guan, I think a multipolar power system would introduce more security to the world system.
Rafael, I remember in your article you seem quite certain that Crimea will basically stay within the Russian Federation. Why so?
So let me put it to you this way, Guan. What would the Americans do if they had annexed half of Mexico in response to what they believed was a Russian-backed coup d'etat? Well, you could be sure that the US would not part with whatever land they'd taken. So what I'm trying to say is that my reason for projecting Crimea as staying with Russia is purely geopolitical. And to be quite blunt, Russia don't want a Western-backed government on their doorstep. And handing over Crimea back to the pro-West Ukraine would be a tremendous sign of weakness and political suicide for Putin back home. And as you well know, with the fall of the ruble and economic sanctions impacting the livelihoods of many in the region, the Russian populace are looking for a show of strength, and to abandon Crimea would just further weaken the image of Putin's government.
And again, we have media here, raising the ante or facilitating rapprochement. How could media help in a constructivist manner? And what's more here to ask is really, who do media serve, supposedly?
Well, the media can begin by presenting a more impartial portrayal of the conflict, analysing the interactions between both sides. By doing this, I believe that not only will this help in de-escalating the tensions between the West and Russia, but it will help to pinpoint the hard facts, as I mentioned in my article. The fact is that this is a very prickly situation, and only cooperation between both the West and Russia can bring an end to the conflict, and further notions of militarism will only escalate and prolong the crisis.
So, Rafael, thank you very much for the very interesting insights, and also for the...
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, sure, of course. And for the article, if you haven't read it, please go. It's quite short and strong. And for that, because I think Rafael just has touched upon some issues that we have in the West, rather than just accusing the Russian side. And as we say, the world is changing day by day. In Bisconia, we hope our knowledge can help you somehow have a better understanding of a different tomorrow. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.